This is a blow to transparency and a blow to a free press.
2020 candidate Tulsi Gabbard was on MSNBC with Chris Matthews, where she did, I think, a fairly fantastic job in discussing the issue with the indictment of Julian Assange. Watch.
What do you make of our effort to extradite and indict and punish probably Julian Assange?
I'm deeply concerned by what's happened today. We look back at the Obama administration's decision during his time not to do this, not to try to extradite Assange and charge him because of their concern about how this government action would impinge on freedom of the press. This is a blow to transparency and a blow to a free press when you have a situation where our government, is in a position where they can basically create this climate of fear against somebody or those who are publishing things that they don't like or saying things that they don't like. And that's the concern here. This is a threat to journalists, but it's also something that threatens every American, because the message that we are getting, that the American people are getting by what's happened here today is, be quiet, toe the line, otherwise there will be consequences. And what we have seen is that so much of the information that's been released has informed the American people about actions that were taking place that they should be aware of. It provided transparency around issues both related to civil liberties as well as actions that our military was taking in the Middle East that they should not have been. So really, I think what's happening here is some form of retaliation coming from the government saying, hey, this is what happens when you release information that we don't want you to release. And I think that's why this is such a dangerous and slippery slope, not only for journalists, not only for those in the media, but also for every American, that our government can and has the power to kind of lay down the hammer to say, be careful, be quiet, and fall in line. Otherwise, we have the means to be able to come after you.
So you don't think that he should have been extradited, and you don't support his prosecution in the U.S.?
I think the charges about hacking, look, those can and should be worked out in the court of law. My point is that I think there's a bigger issue at play here. There's a reason why the Obama administration chose not to extradite and prosecute Assange, because they understood the danger. They understood the danger of the government coming in and controlling essentially what information is and is not being released. We can go back to the release of the Pentagon Papers as an example. We can look to how the American people have benefited from some of this information being released.
Daniel Ellsberg is America's most famous whistleblower.
An American hero.
He revealed decades-long lying by the government about the Vietnam War.
They knew we couldn't win and still sent boys to die.
And I began to see all that killing as murder. And murder, it seemed to me, was something that had to be stopped.
They're going to come after you, you know.
We've got to keep our eye on the main ball. The main ball's Ellsberg.
The hero and a truth teller.
We got to get this son of a bitch.
The American public needed to know how they'd been lied to and manipulated into that war.
Daniel Ellsberg risked being sent to jail for life.
And played a key role in ending the Vietnam War.
An American hero, Daniel Ellsberg.
I hoped that my example would make many other people realize, oh, I can do that, and that's the right thing to do. It didn't happen until Chelsea Manning.
Chelsea Manning leaked damning information on the government and what was happening in Iraq.
Images like these.
American helicopter gunners laughing as they slaughter civilians, and Reuters reporters.
Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards.
It seems like they are playing video games with people's lives.
It was a war crime. That shooting was murder.
Then came the Iraq war logs.
For every Iraqi combatant death, 2 innocent men, women, and children were also killed.
There were 5 9/11s worth of civilian deaths that hadn't been reported.
Here's something else Chelsea revealed.
We have been turning over thousands of Iraqi prisoners to Iraqi custody, knowing they would be tortured.
Direct violation of the UN Convention Against Torture.
1,000 orders saying do not investigate further. An illegal order, which goes right up to the commander-in-chief.
She couldn't in good conscience let these crimes go unreported.
Manning said, I'm prepared to go to prison for life or even be executed to get this out.
She's a hero exposing the crimes of our government and trying to make our country better.
Somebody had to do it.
She was sentenced to 35 years for this.
Chelsea Manning was locked in a cage 24 hours a day with no clothes.
The UN called it cruel and inhuman.
She was held in solitary confinement for the better part of a year.
Over the fact that she told us the truth about what our government was wrongfully doing.
The courage we need is not the courage, the fortitude to be obedient in the service of an unjust war, to help conceal lies. It is the courage at last to face honestly the truth and the reality of what we are doing in the world and act responsibly to change it.
And that's Chelsea Manning who did that. I'm here to celebrate an American hero, a hero of mine. I'm Daniel Ellsberg. I support Chelsea Manning. I hope you will too. The public needs to know truths about government crimes or lies to act as a democracy. Is a different world possible? Yes. A worse world is very possible, and that's the way we're headed. We need more Chelsea Mannings in order to keep this country from becoming like Russia or China.
Hi, I'm Matt Orfala. These are my sources used with fair use.
So that was Matt. That's a video by Matt Orfala, good friend who does lots of work for us too. And here's what Daniel Ellsberg said. Chelsea Manning is again acting heroically in the name of press freedom, and it's a travesty that she has been sent back to jail for refusing to testify to a grand jury. That's what Daniel Ellsberg says about it. Now, if you listen to jagoffs like Steven Spielberg and everybody who was in the movie The Post, they say that, no, it's different. Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, it's all different. Except the guy who actually did it doesn't say that. So I don't know if you know about Chelsea Manning revealed a lot of documents, and WikiLeaks published them. New York Times published some of them too. And it revealed lots of war crimes that the United States was committing. So this was a person who was a soldier, and while in the military, stumbled across all these war crimes that the United States was committing in the name of bringing freedom and democracy to the Middle East, and were committing war crimes. And so a person of conscience like Chelsea Manning decided to release this information so the American people knew what their government was doing in their name. And we have a right to know that. You want to hear Tulsi Gabbard? Here's a real leader.
Good to see you.
So you served 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. You're currently a major in the Army National Guard. Assange, along with Chelsea Manning, spread classified information that prosecutors at Manning's trial claimed could have brought harm to U.S. service members in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you agree with that? And what do you think about Assange's extradition and prosecution in the U.S.?
Look, over time, there hasn't been any proof that that has been brought to Dore. And what we have seen is that so much of the information that's been released has informed the American people about actions that were taking place that they should be aware of. It provided transparency around issues both related to civil liberties as well as actions that our military was taking in the Middle East that they should not have been.
Here's something else Chelsea Manning revealed. Known Egyptian torturers received training from the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. According to a leaked diplomatic cable from Cairo, the head of Egypt's notorious State Security Investigation Service, SSIS, thanked FBI Deputy Director John Pistoli for the excellent and strong cooperation between the two agencies. In particular, the FBI training sessions in Quantico, Virginia were of great benefit to his interrogators. Another cable documented what the U.S. Embassy considered, quote, credible allegations of human rights violations by the SSIS, including torturing prisoners with electric shocks, sleep deprivation to reduce them to a zombie state. The State Department authorized the theft of UN Secretary General's DNA. What? Did you know this?
No, I did not know this.
According to the National Human Collective Directive, a secret document that was signed by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and published by WikiLeaks, U.S. diplomats were authorized to collect biometric and other sensitive information from top UN officials as well as UN representatives from other nations. The Obama administration allowed Yemen, this is another thing Chelsea revealed, the Obama administration allowed Yemen's president to cover up a secret U.S. drone bombing campaign. Barack Obama would never lie. He's not corrupt. Right? We don't need to investigate Barack Obama. We need to investigate Trump. Since December 2009, President Obama has authorized a secret drone bombing campaign in Yemen. A year later, WikiLeaks revealed that Yemen's President Salih had agreed that his regime would, quote, continue saying the bombs are ours and not yours.
The images disturbing and heartbreaking. Children pouring into a hospital, most of them under 10 years old, still wearing their backpacks and school uniforms covered in blood. After their school bus was hit by a bomb, a crater at the site of the airstrike, the smoke from the blast visible from miles away. Tonight, at least 29 children returning from a school picnic among the dozens killed. Aid groups demanding an investigation.
Children shouldn't be collateral damage.
These drone strikes have killed large numbers of civilians. So we're killing civilians in someone else's country. And that's why they've been going after Julian Assange ever since then. So that's why they want Julian Assange, is because he revealed war crimes of the military-industrial complex and the intelligence community in the United States. So breaking, former Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning ordered to jail for refusing to testify to a Virginia grand jury investigating WikiLeaks. So they have a grand jury investigating WikiLeaks. So Chelsea's not going to answer their questions. And so they ordered Chelsea to prison. Glenn Greenwald says this is disgusting and all due to the efforts of the Department of Justice to criminalize the publication of classified information in order to prosecute WikiLeaks and Assange, something all press freedom groups, major newspapers, and even the Obama Department of Justice said would be a major threat to press freedom. So he's 100% correct about this. So what Julian Assange did was print. He published classified information. Now, that's exactly what the Washington Post did with the Pentagon Papers. And a publisher has never been held in a criminal offense for doing that. It's always it's only the person who steals those documents. Now, if you steal classified information, you give it to a publisher, the Washington Post, New York Times, WikiLeaks, and they publish it, the government has never prosecuted the publisher, except now. So an investigation into WikiLeaks for publishing is a grave threat to all journalists' rights, and Chelsea is doing us all a service for fighting it. She has already been tortured, spent years in jail, and has suffered more than enough. She should be released immediately. You know who said that? The guy who released the Pentagon Papers. That's Daniel Ellsberg. I love what Caitlin Johnson says. She says, and of course the progressives who've been shrieking about Trump's war on the press for 2 years have nothing to say about this administration setting a horrifying precedent by throwing a whistleblower in jail in order to force a journalist source to testify against them. Of course, the Mick Resistance, who's been screaming bloody murder about Trump saying mean things about Jim Acosta.
That's not an invasion. Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN. All right. And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better. If I may ask one other question. Mr. President, that's enough. I was going to ask one of the other folks. That's enough. Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President, that's enough. Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax.
Has nothing whatsoever to say about this administration pursuing the arrest of a journalist in a precedent which would be devastating for press freedom around the world.
Inform the American people about actions that were taking place that they should be aware of. It provided transparency around issues both related to civil liberties as well as actions that our military was taking in the Middle East that they should not have been. So really, I think what's happening here is some form of retaliation coming from the government saying, hey, this is what happens when you release information that we don't want you to release. And I think that's why this is such a dangerous and slippery slope, not only for journalists, not only for those in the media, but also for every American, that our government can and has the power to kind of lay down the hammer to say, be careful, be quiet, and fall in line. Otherwise, we have the means to be able to come after you.
So you don't think that he should have been extradited, and you don't support his prosecution in the U.S.?
I think the charges about hacking, look, those can and should be worked out in the court of law. My point is that I think there's a bigger issue at play here. There's a reason why the Obama administration chose not to extradite and prosecute Assange because they understood the danger. They understood the danger of the government coming in and controlling essentially what information is and is not being released. We can go back to the release of the Pentagon Papers as an example. We can look to how the American people have benefited from some of this information being released. So I think we've got to look at it within this larger context here and make sure that we understand what's at stake and actually the danger of what happens when we have people in government, whether it's this administration or a future administration, basically saying, hey, look, we can call WikiLeaks a foreign intelligence agency. We can designate an individual as a foreign asset or this or that, simply because they don't like the information that's being published or they don't like the things that you're saying.
Wow. Spot on. And once again, the politician schooling the journalist about journalism. Jake Tapper. Tool, that's why he's got the job. Remember, if he thought like we do, he wouldn't be in that position. He has that job because he likes the way that the establishment thinks. And he's only interested in stories that further his career. And there is the there's the politician schooling the journalist. I love that. That's fantastic. Truth tellers are being actively persecuted by this same power structure, which claims it has the moral authority to topple governments and interfere in international affairs around the world, exactly because they told the truth. Like, this is right out of a movie, right out of a book. Truth tellers are being actively persecuted by the same power structure which claims it has the moral authority to topple governments and interfere in international affairs around the world exactly because they told the truth. Assange started a leak outlet on the premise that corrupt power can be fought with the light of truth. And corrupt power has responded by smearing, silencing, and persecuting him and doing everything it can to stomp out the light of truth, up to and including re-imprisoning an already viciously brutalized American hero like Chelsea Manning. This is as clear-cut an admission as you could possibly get that the most powerful forces in our world are not at all what they pretend to be. Those who run U.S. government agencies and their collaborators are monsters, and they're not even hiding it. I've been saying this for a while. The people running our country are sociopaths. Nancy Pelosi jumping on board with Trump and Elliott Abrams and John Bolton to overthrow an oil-rich nation. She's a sociopath. She's screaming about the poverty in Venezuela while 30 million Americans don't have Medicare for all, and she's the one standing in its way. She's a sociopath. Barack Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize, and he had a kill list. I bet his Nobel Peace Prize made a nice paperweight for his kill list. So that's what's happening with Chelsea Manning. That's what's happening with WikiLeaks. And again, WikiLeaks, people hate WikiLeaks because they told the truth first about the Bush administration, then they told the truth about the Hillary Clinton administration, and they can't have that.
But first up, he is the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, who comes to us from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, Julian Assange. Julian, great.
Hi, guys.
Hey, how you doing, Julian? Great to see you again. You're back in the news, of course, because WikiLeaks released thousands and thousands of emails from the Democratic National Committee right before the Democratic Convention. And you, of course, in the past have released lots of documents from governments. But people questioned whether this was fair game because the Democratic National Committee is not a government, it's private, and some of the donors had their Social Security numbers and credit card numbers released. Do you think this is fair game?
Well, it was definitely good fun. Fair game. Well, we did the same thing to Senator Norm Coleman's campaign, a Republican senator back in 2009. The Turkish political party AKP just the other week, a neo-Nazi party here in the UK a few years ago. Can't remember the name of it. Irritating party. British National Party. So, no, I think I'm super happy with how that's gone. We've had 4 people in the DNC resign. W. Wasserman Schultz, the head, the chief financial officer, the communications director, Louis Miranda, etc. And that shows a kind of instant accountability, perhaps not proper political accountability for a really quite concerted effort through the chain of command at the DNC to make sure that Bernie Sanders didn't win, including by pumping out black PR.
Well, I don't know if that's really true. I mean, I read those emails. There was no smoking gun.
I do. I know that it's true. Well, I know that it's true. Okay. Communications Director Louis Miranda, who has resigned just 3 days ago, instructed his staff, an instruction, not a discussion, an instruction to pump out, quote, in an unattributable manner, statements and an article saying that Bernie Sanders supporters were engaged in acts of violence. So this is the DNC demonizing in a covert manner through its chain of command to the press and its favored press contacts, a Democrat, saying that a Democrat was conducting violence.
And they told the truth about the Barack Obama administration, too. They can't have that. That's why the press doesn't fear CNN. They know CNN's going to go along with every war they put up. The government fears WikiLeaks, and so does CNN. Why? Because they're doing their job way better.
I want to show you another clip here, actually, from the same interview with Tulsi Gabbard, because Chris Matthews is having an awakening. So let me play this clip, and it's kind of funny to see Chris Matthews acknowledge his sort of double standard here, or his awareness that the politicians that he loves have a terrible record when it comes to foreign policy.
How can you explain that every major Democrat in the United States Congress, I mean, the people I would generally like, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, they all supported the Iraq war. They all did it. They haven't apologized that I know about it. Yeah. They all started back that stupid war. Why? Why do smart people back a stupid war? And they did.
Look, you know, it's unfortunate to see how the influence of the foreign policy establishment in Washington, the military-industrial complex, so often goes and wages these regime change wars under the guise of humanitarianism, saying, well, we're going to go in and try to help people in these countries, when in fact every single time what we see is these regime change wars that our country leads ends up increasing the suffering of people in those countries, increasing the devastation. And as we've seen in the Middle East, in countries like Iraq and Libya and Syria, our regime change wars have made our country less safe by strengthening terrorist groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda. The real threat that we're facing right now, Chris, this is an existential threat with this heightening of tensions between the United States and countries like Russia and China, nuclear-armed countries that have propelled us into this new Cold War.